Hello and welcome to another Sunday Superversive live stream. I am your host, Benjamin Wheeler, and I want to thank you for joining us as always to another Pinkerton's Ghost live stream. This will probably be our last Sunday Pinkerton's Ghost Q&A for quite some time, just because we've had a lot of things going on and had to settle it down. How are you doing today, Anthony?
I'm doing wonderful. How about you, Ben?
Oh, I'm doing great. While we wait for people to come in, uh, yeah, I don't know. I got nothing. I live a boring life, Anthony. A hideously boring state of existence. It's not quite death, but it gets there. Not really. I'm actually quite happy.
That's overly negative.
I don't know. The horror of existence or something. Maybe I'm reading too much Sartre. Bug-eyed little Frenchman.
We calling him Sartre now?
I don't know. What is he called?
Isn't it Satra or something?
I don't know. Either way,
Doesn't matter.
no, it doesn't.
Does anybody actually read him? I don't think anybody really does.
Yeah, I don't really think people read most philosophers. I think guys like Nietzsche and so on got lucky. And even
Well,
then.
Nietzsche is actually like a really good writer, like pure writer.
Yep.
Satra supposedly is. I just don't know anybody who's actually read him.
Oh, I'm sure there's some French people, dirty, dirty French people, you know. Actually, I shouldn't say mock them or anything. They are fighting the good fight against the vaccine passport against Macron. And we might actually see the
Yeah.
French government collapse in our time, which is not something I expected.
Which is really more of a commentary on you because the French government collapses more often than it doesn't.
No, it usually gives it about 50 years or something like that. And
Isn't
besides
that
that,
about what we would be at?
damn it,
Ha ha ha. There you go.
it was stable
Like I
during the
said.
medieval period, kind of.
Was it though?
Yes, there were many points in time when it was more or less stable,
When it was technically stable.
and that's all that matters. Hmm.
There you go.
Let's see. Ah, Cordell is here on a Sunday stream. Fantastic. Welcome, Cordell. We'll just give it a minute or two more so that the Twitter post can percolate. I should get on Gab, but I just don't want to.
Yeah, I'm not going to. I'm definitely not joining Gab. For the very simple reason, not for the reason you think, for the very simple reason that I will never use it. I joined MeWe and I regret doing it because it just constantly updates me and I keep forgetting about it and don't bother checking it. Gab would be exactly the same way.
Sure. I'm actually pretty fine with Social Galactic, seeing what people are up to. It's fun.
Social Galactic, I go on like maybe once every 2 months.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest. I use Facebook the most. That's the paradox of the social media companies is that the most useful social media website to be on is the one that the most people are on. I go on Facebook because people I know are on Facebook. That's it. That's the reason.
It's a magnitude problem.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I barely post on Facebook. I only ever post in group comments and threads. Like, I don't even really post on my main thread anymore.
Yeah, it's
Like
always.
my main feed.
I do enjoy seeing you fight with people on some Facebook places. I appreciate it. It brings me joy.
It's actually probably a bad thing that I do it, but
Yay!
Stay away from social media, kids.
All right.
But even then, I don't do it publicly. Like, nobody, if you're not a part of those groups, you would not know that I did that. I'll put it to you that way.
All right. Anyone got any questions? We can start it off, talk about Pinkerton's Ghost, and then we can talk about, I don't know, whatever the SEO wants us to talk about. The algorithm must feed.
Perfect. Oh, will I get computer Discord working? Let's see. If I drop out for a moment, that's why.
Okay.
But keep going.
So, Cordell earlier asked whether or not Jack Morrow's internet search history is basically barbecue. Now, the problem with that is that you assume Jack Morrow has an internet search history. You see, that's government talk, and he doesn't cotton to that business. Nobody likes the government talk. I was just commenting earlier that to be a true blue American, you have to defy the government. Not in any illegal way, mind you, but just in ways you can. That would not in any way be illegal. Did Anthony drop out on us? But yes, if he had an internet search history, which is a very dubious thing, he would use it entirely for barbecue and monster killing and conspiracy theories. In fact,
Yeah,
yeah,
I can't imagine Jack having an internet search, being that careless as
right.
an internet search history.
It's like, finally, we have his internet search history. All it is chicks holding guns. They're fully clothed. One's wearing a burqa. It's not anything. It's not even juicy. Ah.
Meanwhile, Sean just has a Facebook.
Hey guys, here on my new job with the Pinkertons. No, not the investigative company, the conspiracy theory company. Yeah.
Sean, one of Sean's Facebook posts, low-key wondering if the Freemasons are actually evil, guys. It's just that was his last status. Did you know that the Freemasons are the actual mortal enemy of the Catholic Church? It's true. No, that actually is true. There are like 12 anti-Freemason encyclicals. Look it up.
Wow, that doesn't even surprise me.
Like it actually is true, and it's kind of amazing. No, I mean, don't get me wrong. Sean absolutely does have a Facebook, but that's not why he uses it.
Yes, Jack Morrow's internet use is entirely barbecue. That's it. That's the canon now. The canon is barbecue.
The canon is every time he uses the internet, it's just to look up different recipes of barbecue.
He just checks up on Mr. Henderson every now and then. Can't let that 15-year-old with the barbecue pit welded into his truck, get too far away. No, you don't want anything to happen to the sweet child with the fantastic barbecue. Would Jack Morrow care about him if he didn't have barbecue? No, he wouldn't. Just as a person.
He dies. It's the first time in Morrow's life he ever sheds tears.
Not over his mysterious and dark past. Specifically.
No. Does Jack make his own gunpowder? I would imagine, but that's your answer.
Yeah, he farms it out to this former elf slave called Mercy. He used to do it, though. He can do it if he wants. He has his own special stashes.
So the Pinkerton's ghost, it's been established in story that we have stashes set up around the country with Pinkerton's ghost like go bags. Sean accesses one in the story Mystery Meat at the, can't remember what I called it, the Old Norwich Cemetery. I can't remember the name of the town, but there's one that was hidden in a cemetery that Sean accesses in Mystery Meat, and I like to think that the Pinkertons have them set up in similar places. In fact, possibly they could use cemeteries for that purpose.
Okay.
This is me thinking out loud, but it makes perfect sense to me.
Yep. Like it's so like the Pinkerton, like the average Pinkerton loadout is a mix of whatever they find most useful, and whatever they need to make themselves. Like it's kind of got to be like that because some places, like you don't need chupacabra protection in like the Pacific Northwest or whatever. What you do need though is like Bigfoot repellent, and to get that you have to wait 3 days under a tree and hope a Bigfoot comes by, and then you just hold up the cup, and you just kind of hope that he doesn't notice you. It gets
So
bad if he notices.
it's also remember that's also Pinkerton canon. It is absolutely in-story written canon that the Pinkerton go bags are at least are partially designed by like a young child, Jack Morrow, rambling to Control on the over the phone about how to make explosives.
Yep.
And
That's
this is in
actually
fact
true.
canon. It's subtle canon because Sean only mentions that Jack did it, but if you do the timeline, it would have to be a young child, Jack Morrow.
So in that story I implied. Hold on, I'm getting an echo from your phone. Uh, I get I imply that Jack Morrow is like 8 years old, and his mother has just taught him how to start fires in every conceivable conversation, and so he's just talking to the old Control about it. So then you put the wadding, Dang, this kid's got some great ideas.
So for those who don't know what I'm referring to, in Mystery Meat, Sean has to access a hidden Pinkerton stash. And he mentions that Pinkerton combustible policy changed because of the work of Jack Morrow. The thing is that though Sean does not mention this in the story, if you actually work the timelines, Jack needs to be a child. Now, you could say that that's an oversight, but in fact, it was not. Ben noticed that immediately and said, I'm going to leave that intentionally. So, the actual Pinkerton canon is that Jack was a small child and was rambling to Control over the phone, and the old Control, and Control took notes and then used that to update all of the Pinkerton stashes around the country. Which I think is much funnier and more interesting than just, there are Pinkerton stashes. I
Yeah.
also enjoy that for somebody who doesn't listen to these streams, you would have to do the math and then realize that he would have been a child at the time, and then you probably think we just messed up the timeline, but in fact we did not. We were aware of this before the story came out, and we designed it that way specifically.
It also
Cordell asks, "Oh, go ahead."
It also helps establish Jack's childhood and what it's like. Because I have to
Yeah.
very carefully establish how Jack's childhood went down. Because otherwise, he's just some crazy dude out there killing monsters. And don't get me wrong, we need those crazy dudes out there killing monsters. But the problem is that like there's psychological stuff that keeps the stories alive. That honestly, not every author feels the need to put in there.
Cordell asks, "Can any of the detectives cook?" Um, Sean is okay at it. This is not something I ever establish in the story, but Sean lives on his own, so he lives cheap, so he had to learn kind of how to cook. He's not a wilderness cook, though, like Jack would be. However, old Tom would have given him a crash course on that, so I would say Sean certainly could. And I would imagine that Jack is probably good at wilderness type, hunt a fox, strangle it with your bare hands, and then cook it over a fire.
He puts out traps just like everyone else.
But can he cook?
He can certainly try. It's not that bad. He doesn't get food poisoning.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that canonically all of the Pinkertons are currently bachelors. Sean is in a relationship or will be. I guess that's technically still a spoiler as of now, but not really. Anybody who's following the writing on the wall can tell. And he was at one time married, but at the moment, all three Pinkertons are still bachelors. So I would say that probably all three of them, none of them are cooks, but all of them can cook decently well.
I'd say Jim's probably the worst cook.
Probably just by default, because Jack, I can imagine would have specifically learned because it's a useful wilderness type skill. And yeah, Sean just I've old Tom would give him that sort of wilderness training, but even besides that, I just imagine that Sean living on his own would look up a few recipes for things he'd like to make on the cheap. Because again, canonically, the whole idea behind Sean is that he's kind of a normal guy. Jim, though, I imagine would care the least. Carl Philip Gabler says, "What game are you guys playing?" Not we, just Ben.
Nightmare Reaper.
Uh,
Think
what's it?
of
Nightmare Reaper.
I would describe it as the average white girl experience. Crazy. You're this crazy.
Amazing.
With BPD. How about that? This is the average white girl with BPD.
So
Basically,
the average white
it's
girl.
right exactly. It's a Doom clone with a lot of random generation. It's actually pretty good, and even though there's a crap ton of red flags, probably in its base, just by saying random generation, it it works. I'm really late in the game, so things are kind of just kicking my butt. Um, yeah, but I've got a super weapon, so I am okay. The dual SMGs. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, and there's
Yes, he is playing while we chat. By the way, this is an old Digibro trick. He used to do this on his old videos just to give the people who were watching the video something to look at while he talked. Um, so we stole that.
I mean, it's just a logical thing to do. It helps
Hmm.
that I can talk while doing it, though. Hmm.
Yeah, it's just it gives you something visual to pay attention to.
Yep. And that's what
That's
it.
not just a blank screen.
Yeah. Since this is audio visual medium.
Hmm.
Oh, look at me looking the fancy $2 words.
Specifically, Digi did this with his first Sword Art Online video, which was like the first video of his that really blew up. He was playing some sort of MMO in the background. And he specifically said that he was doing it just because he wanted something on screen while he ranted for an hour. Yeah,
Yeah.
seems like a smart idea.
I tend to do this when I'm audio editing. Play something and then listen for the skips or repeats or coughs or strange sounds I don't remember being in there. You know, like a
So,
liquid jello crawling across the wall, that sort of sound. And eye blinking.
exactly. So, going on to more Pinkerton's ghost content. Uh, we got the first episode coming out this week. Is it Ken's episode coming out first or yours?
It's mine. Ken's episode is in the tank, so everything's golden right there.
Yeah,
And
my episode 3 is recorded. I just need to do a little bit of editing before I hand it off to Ken. So, or I should say, my first episode, episode 3 of season 2, is recorded, and it came out well. There, honestly, I don't even need to do that much editing. It'll probably take me like 10 minutes to edit, and then I'll send it off to Ken, and he'll, fix it up with his wizardry. So, Ben, why don't you tell us what your first episode is about?
in this one, it's called Karen's Fee. Jack has received word where his mom might be, and he goes in after her into the depths of Hades.
So, Karen, as in Karen the boatman, right? CH.
Okay, K.A. Ron.
I actually saw for the first time, not that long ago, I saw the actual skit that you're referring to.
Wow.
Uh, the Key and Peele, and it was in fact actually pretty funny. I was surprised. I thought it was going to be terrible. Honestly, I thought it would be cringe, but no, I actually laughed at it. It amused me.
I actually just
I
watched
only
yeah.
Go ahead.
I just watched the Rick and Morty Thanksgiving special. That was pretty funny.
Oh, you mean when they turn to turkeys?
Exactly. It's so
Yeah,
ridiculous.
it was all right.
It was great. It was fantastic.
Honestly, this season of Rick and Morty has not been very good, except for like, I mean, there's been one really good episode, which was the duplicate episode,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and two okay episodes, which was Mr. Nimbus and what was it? The one where the car takes them out on like tries to go on a date with a transformer.
And then kills everyone in Transformer Tahoe.
Yes. So those three episodes were pretty good, but the others were not. I didn't think. Smirm episode was just bad.
Yeah. I found the Thanksgiving one very funny. I do like that people are kind of surprised that Rick and Morty is the establishment now, just because it's like it was
It's
always
literally always been the establishment.
yeah like
It was never edgy. Never.
the only thing that made it edgy is the lack of a laugh track.
Please, The Simpsons didn't have a laugh track in the 90s.
I'm
But
making
whatever.
more of a Big Bang Theory joke or a
Uh,
Friends joke or whatever, just because it's like, one of the Owen Benjamin's best live streams was him just going on. All right, let's watch Friends without the laugh track, and it's like a bunch of sociopaths just ruining other people's lives, and it's like, yeah, I dig it,
that's
but
pretty funny.
uh,
Uh,
mm,
yeah, Rick and Morty this season's just been kind of meh. I think it's one great episode, two pretty good episodes, and then the others were not that good.
yeah,
Uh, I did like some of the gags in the episode where they go to the hell world where everybody likes pain.
right.
That was pretty funny. Although the real moment is when Jerry walks out and goes, "Good news, guys! They have the entire Smash Mouth playlist." I think that joke made the whole episode.
It kind of did, and it's I'll give them that they do know how they please pick it up. There we go. How to run their show and stuff like that. But it's just, all it is a piece of media entertainment that's slightly more less. Basically, it's better than like 99% of what's out there. Like anyone who says differently is just deluding themselves, and it's
Well, the problem,
mainstream
yeah,
specifically.
the problem that Rick and Morty has, and the reason that Futurama was better, is that Rick and Morty's whole shtick is undercutting sincerity, and and that's like part of the joke. Like the closest thing that Rick and Morty has to a regular running gag is establishing like background characters in society's complex inner lives, and then killing them off in one-off gags. And don't get me wrong, this can be funny. It was funny in the Mr. Nimbus episode when they go to the Narnia world that slowly evolves a mythology that makes Morty into like their great devil monster thing. Like that was good. But ultimately, it is an entire philosophy that's based on mocking sincerity and character growth. Duplicates episode is a great example of that. The whole point of the episode was undercutting any attachment you have to the characters and what happens to them by pointing out that they could literally replace them with duplicates and you just would not know.
Yep.
So, Futurama, I think, is for that reason at its best anyway. Uh, I don't know if it's more consistent, especially in the Comedy Central years, but even when it wasn't, even in the Comedy Central years, at its best, Futurama had emotional sincerity. You know, you
Yes.
were supposed to take what they were doing seriously, at least to a point. Like, one of the best things, in fact, by far, the best thing about Futurama is that Fry starts off the series when he shows up in the future. You just know that he's happy about it because honestly, his life in the present kind of sucked. You know, what was he? A pizza delivery guy, I think.
Yeah.
Uh,
For a New
yeah.
York pizzeria.
He was a pizza delivery guy. He didn't feel like his family appreciated him. He didn't feel like he always felt overshadowed by his brother. You know, all sorts of things like that. But the best thing about Futurama is that as the show goes on, it very slowly but very intentionally kind of shows us that Fry, honestly, was wrong about the way that he viewed the present day. That, like, it turned out his brother really did care about him. It turns out his dog was waiting for him even after he left. It turns out, like, and it's slow, but there's just this sort of realization that Fry never properly appreciated his life and what he had going for him. And it's that sort of emotional core that really made Futurama work. Luck of the Fryrish was the most notable example. Oh no. Can you
Oh.
hear me, Ben?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, because bleh. My computer just asked me if it wanted to allow Java SE runtime environment to make changes to my device. No. Anyway. No, I don't want it to. Anyway, to finish what I was saying, though, the point is that Futurama, the best example of what I'm talking about, was Luck of the Fryrish, where Fry is absolutely convinced that his brother stole his lucky four-leaf clover, and then took his name and and stole his identity and was the first man to, like, I forget what it was, go to Mars or something. And Fry is incensed about this and goes to get his heartbreaking scene where you learn that it wasn't that he stole Fry's identity. It was that he named his son after Fry, and that it was his son who went to Mars. And that's the sort of thing that Rick and Morty realizes it keeps undercutting itself intentionally. Like, that sort of emotional resonance wouldn't really hit home. Cordell says, I've started watching House again. I had forgotten how funny that show was. It's impressive, actually, for how dramatic it is. House had a few good seasons. And it has some very, very good episodes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It just
Okay.
spazzed out for a while, as it does.
Yep. Makes sense. Yeah, House was good for a while. Hugh Laurie's an excellent actor. I think House as a medical drama is kind of silly. As a Sherlock Holmes adaptation. But yeah, it has some very good episodes in there. I remember I'm trying to remember the name of the episodes, but it was the one where, like, Wilson's girlfriend gets in the accident and then you have to reconstruct what happens the night that she got in the accident, and you think it might be that House was sleeping with her and that, like, he indirectly caused the accident, and then the reveal is that nothing happened. And of course, they have the famous episode 3 Stories. That's House teaching a group of medical students, and they flash back to 3 different example cases, and the twist is that one of the cases he's talking about is the case of how he injured his leg. That was a really good episode. I remember the finale being really good. Yeah, a lot of it though was kind of nonsense and kind of terrible. But it had its moments.
I think I should reveal to Carl that honestly, I'm playing games in just about everything I show up in, even in like when I'm writing. I will pause the game, write like 100 words, then play again for like 5 minutes. Or like when we have the John C. Wright D&D campaign, I'm playing a little flash game in between things. Like, like my brain is so unoccupied and so like teenager that I just require constant stimulation at this point. And if I don't get it, I just kind of go a little crazy. And by that I mean I play a flash game while I listen to a documentary or something. Like it's just an
Cordell
eternal.
says, "Go
Yeah,
ahead."
it's just an eternal way of keeping me occupied.
So Cordell says, I like Rick and Morty until I learned how big of a degenerate the writer was." Yeah,
Oh yeah, the fact that he
that
hasn't
is
been
an
caught with
entire.
something is just amazing.
Yep, that's an entirely fair thing to say. The very genesis of Rick and Morty is absolutely disgusting. And honestly, this actually comes through in a lot of episodes, which are really uncomfortable and not in ways that we should be laughing at. Like,
Yeah.
for example, in episode 1, when he's required to transport things up his butthole, except that it's his grandfather telling his grandchild to do this.
Yeah.
And it's really, like, it's not funny. It's just extremely uncomfortable, but they seem to think it's funny.
Yep.
I mean, I know that that's an opinion thing, but Rick and Morty will do this sometimes. It's certainly not the only time that they've done it. The sperm episode is actually an example that nobody liked.
Yep. Eventually, like things get like get too far, too spicy for people, and they just kind of go like, ugh. And it's like, yeah, dudes, like it's always been there.
It has, yes. So, at its best, Rick and Morty is extremely clever. And there is some emotional resonance there. I'm not saying like it never goes for it or it never hits that mark. It will, it can. You know, with that said, I think that the existence of sincerity is a harder sell in the Rick and Morty universe, which is why, and it's a lot easier sell in the Futurama universe. Now,
Yeah.
Futurama is also a subversive show. Don't get me wrong. But it's a show where sincerity is allowed to live. Like, you know, Fry is a joke character and Leela is a joke character, but they're in a world where occasionally you are supposed to like take their emotions seriously. You know, specifically Fry and Leela more than anybody else. Bender
Yep.
sometimes too, though Bender is played for laughs so often it's harder. But occasionally. But like there are moments in Futurama that do hit really hard. Like I said, look at the Fryrish. Everybody knows, of course, about the episode where Fry's dog died, which is legitimately like possibly the saddest episode of any television show ever. To the point where it's famously difficult to watch. What else was there? There was. Oh, The Sting was a really good episode. It was a really surreal episode where Fry dies after getting stung by gigantic bees. And then Leela is like undergoing the 5 stages of grief as she comes to term with Fry's death until he like it turns out it was a hallucination or something by the end of it. Point is that it can pull off those types of stories. And Rick and Morty, when it goes for emotional sincerity, it's a lot harder for it to hit well.
Yep.
Like, the most recent example of this where I don't think it worked was the Planetina episode.
Yep.
You know, they end it with, like, that sad song when Planetina leaves, but Like, one of the reviews I read of the episode pointed it out, and they were absolutely correct, where they said, isn't this like the third true love or something that Morty has had on this show? And that's okay, as long as you're playing it all for a joke. But they weren't playing this one for a joke. They were playing sad music, and they seemed to be expecting us to take it seriously. So, like, why am I taking Planetina seriously, but not that one? By the way, really funny gag where Morty had the button that allowed him to rewind time, and he falls in love with the girl, and then Jerry thinks that it's a TV remote and accidentally resets their entire relationship. Like, the joke was extremely funny. I laughed at it, to be clear.
Right.
But that was as much of a true love as Planetina, so why are we supposed to take Planetina, like, as the one that we're supposed to take seriously, and not that girl? You know, not to mention Planetina episode also had a really gross subplot that involved him having orgies with his granddaughter. It was very weird, and I don't think as funny as they thought it was. But
well, they were both going to the same party. He wasn't doing a reverse Christian here.
No, but it was still kind of weird that they were doing it together at all.
Right. Oh yeah, you're absolutely right about that part. Like, they're going to end of the world parties. That's inherently nihilistic, and unfortunately, the character development doesn't really hold up for it, because Rick doesn't party as much as people think he does anymore. In fact, I was watching an old episode, and like, he has character development, and that character development means that he isn't as nihilistic as he was earlier.
So part of the problem too, like MatPat's theory for this season, is that we're seeing the origin story of evil Morty, and that actually is kind of the problem with Rick and Morty generally. Like, that would be great, and I'm all in favor of that sort of twist. I think it could work. But at the same time, it's also like the whole point of a twist like that is that everything we're watching isn't actually supposed to be applied to the characters of Rick and Morty as we know them. The duplicate episode, great episode, extremely entertaining, really clever concept, right?
Yep.
Enjoyed it start to finish. But the whole point of the episode is to undercut any sort of attachment you have to the characters.
Yep.
It's literally them bragging that you don't even know if the version of the characters you're watching are the same as the ones you started with. And it doesn't matter.
Yep.
Like, that is the actual point of the episode.
And it's not so, like, the way they portray it isn't fully insulting to the fans as it is in a lesser quality work. Like,
no, it's not insulting. It's more just it's an inherent limitation of the show.
Yep.
Coral Mitchell asked, did you guys ever watch Hell on Wheels? Never heard of it, sorry.
I've heard of it, but never watched it.
Carl Philip Gabler says, oh, go ahead.
I was on the topic of sincerity. That's something I'm very careful to keep with Pinkerton's Ghosts. I don't want it to be a smirk or anything like that. I have Jack talk about it in the next episode, where he basically goes, I've got to live a certain way. And he's basically describing himself being genuine in what he feels about it. He hunts monsters because he's genuinely a monster hunter. Like, we don't like, smirk at the audience or whatever. It's like, yeah, do you really believe there's monsters? We go, yeah, there's monsters. Fortunately, people are killing them. Fortunately, the spiritual war is we serve the right side, and so on and so forth. Like, we're not undercutting ourselves. And I wouldn't allow us to undercut ourselves.
I agree.
Like Rick and Morty does. Though I do like Keith David whenever he shows up. I know I shouldn't, but...
Carl Philip Gabler says, what is with degenerates who think something gross is funny? At least South Park usually does something unexpected with it. Don't talk to me about South Park. I hate South Park. I've tried watching it before. I absolutely hate it. Yeah. Nothing about the sense of humor resonates with me.
Huh.
Sorry. I just don't like it.
Oh, hey, good news from Ken. He got that audition he was talking about earlier. He got
Uh,
cast as it.
oh, wait, whoa, what?
As people might know, Ken is an actor, and he got a position in a Beauty and the Beast play.
Oh, wow, what's he gonna be?
I think he said Lumiere.
Wow.
I know, that's kind of important. He'll be the
I didn't
prettiest.
know Ken could sing. Although I'm not surprised by it.
I
I
don't.
just didn't know.
I don't know. The Lumiere has never been the best part of the singing.
What? Be Our Guest is a great song. Shut up.
Sure, it's a fine song. It's a fantastic song. I just don't think much of the singing of it.
I mean, granted, part of the joke is that Jerry Orbach, who sings it, is doing an absolutely atrocious French accent. And, like, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be bad. So, as long as I guess he could replicate that terrible Lumiere French accent action.
I'm gonna warn you, Anthony. All French accents are bad,
They are.
and it's a
Actually,
problem with the
that's a
French.
genuine point. So, if you've ever heard of the movie The Walk, probably not, but it was kind of a thing a few years ago. It starred Joseph Gordon-Levitt. So anyway, it was based on a true story about a guy who did a walk on a tightrope across two skyscrapers in New
Oh
York City.
yeah,
I can't remember what they were, but it doesn't matter.
it was the Twin
Point
Towers.
is, was it?
Yeah.
I literally don't remember. But anyway, so they made a movie based on it. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt had to put on a French accent for the movie because the dude who did The Walk was French, and everybody criticized his accent, except for the one problem: he sounded exactly like the original guy, dead on, and everybody was criticizing his accent because it sounded fake.
But it turns out the guy was pretending to be a Frenchman, I guess.
It turns out people don't know how actual Frenchmen sound.
I assume it's with one thing of wine and with a thing of wine in one hand and a sneer in their mouth. Oh, exactly like that. I want to apologize to the French.
You shouldn't.
They deserve what they get.
They do.
Actually, because they're fighting against the French passports, I know vaccine passports. I know I shouldn't give them garbage, but it's the
Honestly,
American way.
one of the best things about the recent election was Trump using "Do You Hear the People Sing" for his rallies.
I missed that part.
Oh, it was funny. He would come out and they would play "Do You Hear the People Sing" as he walks out. It was pretty funny. Whatever. Uh, Back to Pinkerton's ghosts. Ken isn't here. When he gets on, if he gets on tonight, we'll have him talk about his episode, so I'll mention mine. Episode 3 is going to be, I have mentioned it for a long time now, because I originally came up with the idea last year, but I actually wrote it. And it's done, and the first episode is recorded. It is a, still untitled, I didn't think of a title yet, time travel story. Ooh, and we're not talking, not like the shenanigans in Kronos' tomb. That stuff was amateur hour.
Was it?
That was gimmick stuff.
It wasn't even time travel. His consciousness was just shooting forward. That's it. That's all that was happening. And besides that, you're
No,
building on Kronos' tomb. I'll cut you.
I am, yes.
I'll get you for this.
No. So in my story, we're talking real full time travel here. Bodily, long time into the past. So Carl asked, do you guys talk a lot to make sure your stories fit together, or mostly independent? A lot.
All the
I
time.
would say a lot.
I
What'd you say, Ben?
Yeah, well, I was also gonna make a Samurai Jack joke, but uh, no, we chat all the time. Since I'm the editor, producer, director, whatever, I do tend to like have a firm hand on what's being produced. I'm okay if they bring out surprises, but I have asked them to rewrite it on occasion. Like especially with Planetary Anthology Soul, I know what a story should look like once I read it. And sometimes there's not really a lot of improvements, or you just know the writer can't really improve it. Other times, like with David Halquist's, oh no, I forget. With David Halquist's story, uh, I basically said, okay, these are the beats I like. I hate everything else. Let's rework this into a more high sci-fi John C. Wright worthy noir. Actually, I'm gonna link that because he did a great piece of work on Planetary Anthology Soul.
Nice.
But yes,
So
so I do that for them too.
to answer your question for Pinkerton's Ghosts, here is how this goes. I'll give you a quick snapshot of how season 2 kind of is coming together. Is coming because it's all still work in progress. But so after season 1, we kind of went story at a time, but we made sure we were talking frequently so that if we wanted to layer in references to other stories as well as set up future events, we all knew about it and we all knew what the other ones were doing, so nothing was contradicted and everything was set up properly.
Mm-hmm.
After near the end of season 1, after the last stories were all written, but before they had come out, we met and we had a season 2 pitch meeting basically, where we planned out roughly, very roughly, with room for change, what we were going to do in season 2, and when each story was going to take place, what was going to happen in them, what the arcs of the characters were, and how they would intersect with each other. Like, Pinkerton's Ghosts is an interconnected project. It is not just like a series of one-off stories that have nothing to do with each other. Things are not put there haphazardly. We really do think this over hard in advance, and I think that is very important. Even if most readers and most viewers don't understand or don't appreciate all of the extra work put into it, we know, and we're artists. As pretentious as that sounds, it's absolutely true.
Yes,
Like,
actually.
like it sounds pretentious, but I really don't mean it in a pretentious way. I don't mean it I don't mean like we're artists as in, we know our work is quality. No, it's more like we take a certain amount of pride in it that, for example, if you were to ask us, I think, I know certainly with myself, and I know with Ben, and I'm pretty sure with Ken, all of our characters fit into certain archetypes. However, I do not think of Sean as an archetype. I think of
Right.
Sean as a specific human being. Like, he is not just, oh, he fits these noir tropes and I want a noirish type character. No, he fits them for specific reasons and he acts this way for specific reasons. And I know, what makes him tick and why and how he works. And it's the same with Jack. Jack fits certain tropes. He's definitely a character who fits into an archetype, but Jack is not just that character, right?
Right.
Jack is Jack is a person to us.
Yes. Jack has
So,
specific wants, desires, hang-ups, and issues that go beyond what the story has to offer. Like, one of the failings of the Magnus archives is that the characters often don't have anything not revolving around the Magnus archives or the main plot line. And it kind of shows as the story goes on when characters don't develop as they should. Same with kind of Night Vale. What plot they have is honestly entirely unnecessary, um, and doesn't like. It's one of the forced plot is actually one of the major points where people just stop watching it when the corporation takes over. So I'm
so
avoiding that.
Carl Gabler says the first few episodes seemed pretty standalone, but as it went on, the connections got more noticeable, even back to the start. I'm glad to see you say that, because that was extremely intentional. At least among my part. The idea was that early on it was supposed to seem like, they were just detectives who were undergoing cases, and then slowly an overarching story was forming in the background.
Yep.
So I'm actually pretty glad that it worked out that way. Uh, Again, this was one of those things that when we did it, even though none of us said out loud, there's always the point, like, it's possible nobody will get that we're doing this and nobody will appreciate it, but we know.
Yep.
You know, we know what we're doing, even if nobody else does. So I am glad to see that at least one person kind of got what we were going for there. So I'll tell you, like, that's a good example. So here is how season 1 kind of worked. We were talking early on what the overarching plot was. Now, Pinkerton's ghost is absolutely, and Ken's not here, but I know he would agree with me, it's Ben's baby, right?
Yes.
He contacted us. He asked us if we wanted to be a part of it. He came up with the overarching plot idea for season 1, at least. Was pretty much all him, which is fine. I mean, honestly, I had other stuff going on anyway. I couldn't have done as much work as he did, and I wouldn't have wanted to. So, the overarching plot of season 1 was the Pinkertons, our detectives, are the last 3 Pinkerton detectives. The others have all disappeared, and we didn't know exactly why, but we had, even early on, we had a vague idea that the Grand Masons, I believe, were involved. Though I don't think we had as much detail yet.
I didn't
we
have
also weren't
detail, but I did know I wanted something like it, which
Yeah.
is more than just oh, it's the Masons. No, they represent a whole lot more than just evil space fraternity thing. I don't know. I don't
We
know
also
why I
knew
said
something
space.
was up with Control, though we weren't sure until near the end exactly what it was. Like, it was a legitimate point of, I wouldn't say disagreement, because we didn't really disagree, but of discussion if Control was actually a bad guy or if Control was a good guy who had been, who was being manipulated. Like, that was something we actually had to sit down and decide. We genuinely were not sure at first. I think we were leaning towards her being a good guy pretty early on, though.
Yeah.
But it was, it was still something that we had to decide upon, right?
Yep.
So in those early episodes, this was the point that we had to emphasize. Sean drops a line about how this is the first, about in like episode 2 or something, about how it's weird that nobody else has been making reports. Very casually, very just, hey, I wonder why nobody else is in there. And he also mentions Old Tom. So Old Tom was a Ben creation. The original backstory of Sean was roughly the same, except that with no training by Old Tom. Ben said, Sean needs to have an excuse to be competent enough to hang with the Pinkerton, so let's add an old Pinkerton who trained him. Right? And I said, okay, that makes sense. And Old Tom makes it into the story. As it went on, Sean starts referencing Old Tom more or less every story, or like every other story.
Yeah.
And we decide that Old Tom, it would just make sense for him to play a larger role in the plot, right? Like, just because of the sheer number of times and the importance to Sean's backstory, that he should probably show up at one point. So that's when and also we had decided about midway through the season, it was definitely going to be the Grand Masons. So Ben starts writing in references to the Grand Masons. Ken starts writing in references to the Grand Masons, and I decide in the episode where he meets Old Tom, or in the incident where he meets Old Tom, that he's going to go and hunt out like a Grand Mason base in Boston, and that was the Root Castle Manor mystery. So that was, again, it didn't need to be Grand Masons. It was Grand Masons because Grand Masons was what we decided was going to be the story. And then we built off of that. So a bounty hunter goes after Sean. Well, why is the bounty hunter going after Sean now? Because he just burned.
Good night, Chris.
That show's like almost 60
So I'm live streaming.
Good show.
All right.
Hello, Ben's friend, brother. I don't know. Hello.
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah.
Okay. So it became, too, a kind of a cause and effect thing. Why does a bounty hunter get sent after Sean in the episode after Rewcastle Manor Mystery? Well, the idea that we came up with was because Sean had just made himself noticeable. Also, why was Sean one of the 3 Pinkertons alive when he was clearly newer and weaker? Well, part of it was that he was being protected by Morgana. Part of it was that they didn't really consider him a serious threat, right?
Yep.
Like, so after he burnt down the Rewcastle Manor, suddenly he's a serious enough threat that they're going to send somebody after him specifically, when previously they were content to just let him take on dangerous missions and hope that that kind of worked. Now, Jim and Jack just survived because both of them are good. Yeah, they're just, and they got lucky. They also got lucky.
In universe,
I mean,
in universe, Jack is. I'm getting echoes again. Is Jeremiah Pike the headmaster of the Grandmaster of the Grand Mason's son? And he, up until Karen's fee, is more or less marked for things that make him valuable alive until they can drag him to the altar. That will change by the end of the season. With Ken, it's in his episode, which will be up for backers next week, which I should link in here. Next week, where he will go to a special party. Please support us, because it's otherwise how will Anthony buy his coffees on a teacher's salary?
I do nothing but drink coffee. Coffee is my life. I am a being made of caffeine.
I just drink White Monster Energies. Basically, Jim is invited to a black tie gala for the Society of the Eye, which is one of the members of the Illuminati and so on and so forth. Which, if they could stop backbiting each other, could probably be a force to reckon with, but nope. It's a universe where, like, good will triumph over evil, but evil is smart enough to subvert good. So it kind of, like, balances it out in the scheme of things. Because we do have to make sure that the monsters are deadly and scary and so on and so forth, as well as the villains, worth, hissing at in the movie theater or whatever. Which is apparently something people do, but I've never actually heard of it myself.
So, the reason that I went into all of that detail about the story is to answer the question of, like, that was how Season 1 specifically came about. And Season 1 was, remember, the first season, so we were still kind of trying to understand how this was going to work. Season 2 worked a little bit differently, though not that differently. It's still going to be, a lot of similar stuff is going to be happening while we write it, I think. But we actually had a pitch meeting. We went through, all right, so on episode 1, we want this to happen. Episode 2, we want this to happen. Episode 3, we want this to happen, and so on and so forth. There's also the idea that kind of came about during the meeting that Season 1 was very much a pretty even split. And I don't mean number of episodes. I mean in terms of, like, their arcs and developments between Jack, Sean, and Jim, right?
Yep.
Like, they were all more or less developed concurrently. And that's great, and it makes sense for Season 1. Season 2 is unofficially a Jack season. Like, officially, unofficially.
Right.
Not that we're all going to have the same number of episodes, and Sean and Jim are absolutely going to undergo development. Don't get me wrong. We have very specific ideas of where they're going to go. But the main plot and the most development is going to center around Jack. Now, for the longer term plan, Season 3 is probably going to be, as of right now, a Sean season. And Season 4, then, is probably going to be a Jim season. And then Season 5 is going to be all three of the characters again are kind of going to get even time, especially because season 5 is the tentative final season of Pinkerton's Ghost, at least this incarnation of it.
Yep.
So it's going to be large. I think we're probably, this is like way in advance and I'm speculating, so all of this can change at any time, but it's probably going to center largely around like resolving the main plot.
Yep. For
So
the characters and so on, like I've said in other live streams how I want, the characterizations to end and what I want where it's to be. Since it's fundamentally a show about civilization and defending it, I have specific goals as to where I want all these guys to be. And if they're not there, I'll make sure it happens. Not because of any
yeah,
unnatural story progression, but just because, their characterization has to have a goal. And if people are the same when it starts in a multi-episode series like this, it's kind of a failure on my part, more than the guy's part.
you know what though? I don't think you'll have to worry about it because I think we're all pretty much on the same page too.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm just talking
Um,
in the general sense.
so for this season, Jack's storyline heavily involves his mother and dealing with that. Now, Ken will have to talk more about what he's doing himself, but in terms of what Sean is going to go through, Sean is about now that the protection of Morgana has been removed, Sean's stories are going to become a lot more overtly dangerous. And when I say overtly dangerous, not that he wasn't doing dangerous things last season, but it's more like this season, Sean is going to start taking hits, like real physical hits. And you're going to see this as soon as episode 1 of, Sean's episode 1. So I guess episode 3. You're going to see this as soon as episode 3. Things are going to happen to Sean that are a lot more permanent than previous, and people are going to be doing things to him that are a lot more personal and a lot more visceral than what was happening previously, and Sean is going to have to deal with that. Sean is also juggling a potential romance, and he's doing this while he still has lingering feelings for his ex-wife.
Oh my.
So that's also a thing.
The drama.
The
We
drama.
spoil our fans, don't we, with the drama.
We do. You're all should be thankful that you're fans of our work.
We know what the
Carl says,
people
"You guys
want.
make writing seem like so much fun. I should try it for real." Yes,
Don't.
1, yes, you should. 2, I actually don't have a particular amount of fun writing. I've mentioned this before, but writing Pinkerton's Ghost is really weird. I don't dislike it, but I don't actively enjoy it either. I like the outcome. I like what I come out with. Honestly, there's this whole thing where writers are supposed to be dissatisfied with their work. They're
Yeah.
supposed to look at it and then they're supposed to say, like, oh, I hate looking at my old work. But I'm not like that. Like, I think that my work has been fine. It could be better, but I try to view it with a level head. If I thought any of it was genuinely bad, first off, Ben wouldn't let it get published. He would make me rewrite it, and has.
Yep.
And he absolutely has done that. But besides this, this discussion of writing, to me, like you're saying it sounds fun, this is more fun than the actual writing. The actual writing is work.
Yep. So
It's not terrible work, but it is work.
yeah, it's not physically exhaustive, but echo again. But I do.
I don't have anything up. My phone's not on, but
Oh.
whatever. Keep going.
Oh, I know who it is. So maybe I don't know. So the thing with writing is, for me anyway, is that it's a compulsion to create art. more than anything else. Put my pain onto the page. I'm a tormented artist, baby. Uh, but no, that line never works. And secondly, I have gifts as an artist, just like Anthony has gifts as an artist, just like Ken has budding gifts as an artist, uh, and so on and so forth. And I use them to the best effect I can, but that doesn't mean, you know, like we consume a lot of critical media, like people talking about things, discussing things, seeing
Yes,
how things go
I
up
have a
there.
problem. I will watch critical reviews of things I have never watched or read. I have never watched The
Same.
Last Jedi, and I know the story in more detail than most of its fans.
Yep. I actually formatted John C. Wright's seminal review, which is itself like a 200-page book. I love it. I love it. Anyway, but yeah, so it's like the way we talk is we know how to talk about writing in the sense of um like how it should look outside to other people. As well as to not be deceived about our own quality. A lot of artists are deceived about their quality. And it is a damn shame because they shouldn't be deceived about their quality because honestly, it usually just isn't as good as it needs to be. Um, and some of that for like, especially some of the mid list tour authors, is more of a question of editing. Um, like, their head editor is terrible. He might be a quality editor in the sense of like, oh yeah, he's got those dotted I's and T's and stuff, but he's terrible in the sense of he goes for his politics over quality story writing, and that's important. Like, ultimately, Tor should have remained as popular as it was in the 1970s to now, but it didn't. It didn't for the simple reason that their head editor decided to not point at quality works. John C. Wright should have gotten way better deals than he ever did. They didn't advertise Count to a Trillion. I only knew about it because I knew John C. Wright. Uh,
So,
and other things
John is
like
weird
that.
to me because John has some of my favorite books and other stuff that I just like don't buy him that I really just don't care for. Not that I don't like it, it's just clearly not my style. Like I bought Golden Age on the recommendation of everybody with a pulse and because everybody adored Golden Age and I just did not like it. Like not that it was bad, but I felt like I was being overwhelmed with ideas and things, so I could barely understand what was happening. On the flip side, Awake in the Nightland was absolutely incredible. Uh, so John's kind of a weird one for me. Green Knight Squire, great book. Some Wither, not really a fan.
I
He's a little
enjoy
hit
it.
or miss. Uh, but hit or miss sounds even more harsh than I mean it to be. 'Cause it's more like he'll either sometimes he hits home runs and sometimes it's just not my thing more than it being bad. Yeah. But Vox Day even describes Some Wither as a gamma wish fulfillment story, and I just as like the genre that it was a part of,
Yeah.
and he published it. So yeah,
Yeah. And the thing is that it doesn't.
yeah. Sometimes Carl says sometimes he hits home runs for people who aren't you. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I fully admit that. Golden Age, everybody adored it. Everybody I talked to who read Golden Age adored it, and I like couldn't finish the book. Not because it was bad, but because I like genuinely couldn't grasp what was going on in the story, and I couldn't connect to any of the characters.
I wasn't reading my comments, so I'm hopping on now.
Hello.
Hey. I just wanted to say, you just gotta like let all the information kind of just like pass over your head and just like absorb it without really thinking too much, and then just pay attention to the characters with some of John's stories.
I still.
I mean,
Yeah.
occasionally, yes. So some of them, like Awake in the Nightland, I adore. Like legitimately one of my favorite books ever. And it's really weird, actually, because Awake in the Nightland is technically 4 different stories that were all written at different times that were compiled together. But they all fit together so well as a cohesive whole that it's almost like it's kind of surprising that they weren't written as one narrative, if that makes sense. Like, yes, they all take place at different times, but they're so thematically linked and connected. Yeah, one exploring the love between friends, the love between siblings, the love between father and son, and then the love between man and wife, and the love between God and man. In the final story, literally all of the varieties of love, family, friends, romance, love of God, all explored in those stories. That they really do feel like they're all part of one
I will say,
continuous narrative.
some of my favorite stories of John are the ones where he captures so well the way to like write fiction that just makes you like that Christianized fiction, that it's like the story isn't like, well, a lot of times it's like overtly, Christian, but like the Book of Feasts and Seasons, after I got done reading that, I was just like, wow, God loves me so much. Like I was like in tears. Or things like it's been a while, but One Bright Star to Guide Them, or the ending of Iron Chamber of Memories, and then like what you're describing, where it's looking at these different themes of like love, and of course if you tell John like, wow, that was an amazing story, he'll just thank the muse and say that wasn't him. But that's one of my favorite things about John. Can have such vast fiction, especially with like sci-fi and stuff. Like his stories are twisty, as I described.
Yes.
And I like listening to Ken reading them, because then I don't have to try and figure out what the words say, and I can just kind of hear them and just kind of let it wash over me, and then pay attention to like the characters. Like, I appreciate how vast it feels. Like there's so much there.
Yeah.
These words
So,
have 5 syllables.
John's.
I just can't read. You guys should know this. I can't read. I have no idea how to look at a word and sound it out. I can't. So.
Just like my character in John C. Wright's D&D campaign, Aeneas, the Emperor of Man.
Boy! I just started reading. Boy, hang on. I just started Superluminary. I found it on Audible. He turns into an egg, and that's like in the first couple episodes. And then Jaji was like, "Oh yeah." Then Ben does all this stuff with him, and then like I'm barely into the story, and I'm just like, I don't know how to handle this character and his monstrosityness. I was like, an egg with legs that was snapping off, because he was like, that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Like John has such a mind of just like, and then all the stuff with it, and I just absorb the story and not worry too much about like understanding it. Just like, wow, this setting, there's a lot going on. This is cool. I'm just gonna focus on the characters and just kind of let it all, permeate. I feel like that's the right word.
For the record, like, I have a similar attitude towards Gene Wolfe, who happens to be John's favorite author. I cannot read Wolfe. Like, I've tried multiple times. I finally finished a novel by him, The Sorcerer's House, and my experience of it was like this. I finished the novel. I said, I guess that was okay. Then I read John's review of the novel, and John pointed out a plot twist in the book that he said was one of the most brilliant he had ever seen, that I had completely missed when I read it. After John described, I was like, oh, yeah, so that's what happened.
Yeah.
I did not grasp it when I read the book. I have tried his Book of the Long Sun and Book of the New Sun series and whatever, and I could not finish it. I just couldn't do it. Like, I tried. I own multiple books. Somebody recommended Book of the Long Sun, so I said, oh, it's like G.K. Chesterton, but sci-fi. And I tried reading it, and I couldn't get past, like, chapter 5. I was like, this is painful. I don't understand.
Sometimes it just be like that. Also, I think it's hilarious. So you're like, one of the only people that has told Jaji that you don't like the Mr. Spaghetti Rescue story. Actually, she's happy. She was really happy when she heard that. Do you know why? Do you know why she was happy?
No,
Because it's like she wrote this expecting people to hate it, and then no one hated it but you. So you made her happy by hating it.
That's really funny. I would not tell that story if I hadn't accepted one of her stories for God Robot, and if I wasn't also a fan of Rachel Griffin, because then I'm just being mean, to someone who wrote a story I didn't like, and then I just insulted her writing. I'm not insulting her writing as a whole. I like quite a lot of Jaji's writing. I just didn't like that story. And
Fair. It is a pretty interesting story. But I just think it's funny because I liked it. But apparently most people like it, and so she was a little disappointed when no one hated it until you. So
which one is
congratulations.
it? House of the Lord Song?
No, the Mr. Spaghetti Rescue. Oh, what is it called?
So I
Rescue
can
of Mr.
describe it.
Spaghetti.
In issue 5 of the Sci-Fi Journal, Jaji, I can't remember the title, but Jaji wrote a story about it was set in the Prospero universe.
Right, where...
And to be fair, by the way, I look back on it, and to be fair, once I realized it is a children's story, I like it a little bit more. Like, I understand what she's trying to do a little more. But I was like, there are way too many exclamation points. The dialogue is stilted and just lame. The plot is contrived. Like, I couldn't believe that people liked it. So I asked her to do Into God Robot basically as a favor, because I was asking John, and Jaji was also a published author. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to ask one, I should ask her as well. And then she sent me a story called Ring of Sounding Brass, and the story was amazing. Like, it's honestly one of my favorite stories in God Robot, to the point where I couldn't believe it was written by the same person. I was like, how did she write something this good and also write that other terrible story? But like I said, then I reread it, and when I realized it was like specifically designed for children, it kind of clicked a little bit more. It explained the use of exclamation points and the simplified characters and things like that.
Wait, we're talking about the same story, right? Or am I?
I am almost sure.
With the
Yeah.
elves
Is
and
it
the
the
mind
one
and
where
the changelings?
Yeah.
The changelings
Yes. We're
and
talking
the
about
sun?
the same story.
Okay, cool.
So I'll
That's
explain
a
why
pretty
it's
fun to write
amazing.
for kids.
Hold on. I'll explain why it's amazing.
I'll agree with Ben. It's amazing.
So it hits the emotions and the issue of having, shall we say, a changeling sibling. Like, I've done a lot of interactions with it. My brother's autistic, that sort of thing, and it hit it just right. And it's hard to describe it because it's something that if you just don't have the experience with it, honestly, I'd be surprised if it, accepting of course the frail emotional sensibilities of women. But that if a guy, I'm not surprised that guys don't get it as much, especially if you don't have the, shall we say, heavy issues of somebody who is just that mentally disabled and you have to care for them.
So
Definitely blew me
I can
away.
definitely I can grasp that. I didn't, and like I said, in retrospect, I look back on the story more kindly than when I first read it. Ring of Sounding Brass is honestly like an incredible story. We use it as the anchor story for God Robot intentionally. Like, it just made the most sense as the final story of the book. So I've mentioned it a few times, but I know that not everybody has read God Robot. So for people who don't know, Ring of Sounding Brass is a story that's set in the far future, in galaxies far away, on a space station called the Ouroboros Space Station. And a woman named Astrid, yes, for people who read her Rachel Griffin series, it is actually the same character, by the way.
Really?
I learned later. Yes. So, according to Jaji, this story was it was Astrid's backstory before she ended up at the school, at Roanoke Academy. So, yes, it is actually the same character. William Locke, as well, is in it. So, the story is about Astrid works for the Ouroboros space station, and in her spare time, she handles these robots, and who have been used as like war machines, going around the universe, slaughtering people. They absolutely like. I think that they fought Astrid's planet, if I'm remembering correctly. I haven't read the story in a while, I'm afraid, so I can't remember the exact details. But I believe they went to Astrid's planet, uh, and they like slaughtered her people, and she had this burning hatred of the robots. So in her spare time on the Ouroboros space station, which was currently working on a project where it would open up wormholes to other parts of the galaxy, she was messing with these robots, trying to figure out a way to reprogram them so she could kill them all. And it is heavily implied that the robots are sentient beings, and she doesn't care because they're war machines and they're evil. Then one day she finds a robot that has the exact same, it looks different on the outside, but has the exact same like robotic brain as the other robots. But when she talks to it, this robot has been converted. Like it is essentially, even though I don't think she actually uses the word, it is essentially now a Christian robot. And it has an argument with Astrid where she is basically points out to her that now all she really needs to do now, she doesn't need to kill them all. She could just reprogram the robots and they could go out and they could convert people. And Astrid is at first horrified by this. First, she doesn't really believe it, but when she's finally forced to accept that, yes, this is in fact a possibility, she doesn't know what to do next. Then the robot tells her that William Locke, who she is in love with, is in fact a terrible person. That he is so blinded by his duty to science and his exploration of the universe that when he opens those wormholes, he's going to be ignoring the warning of hundreds of scientists who are telling him about evil forces beyond the other side of the wormhole that he is going to be letting into the universe unless Astrid stops him. It's just a brilliant, like, the whole idea behind the story is so insanely brilliant. Everything about it is just incredibly clever, and we were, like, me and my sister, who agreed with me and really didn't like the Mr. Spaghetti story, we were both thunderstruck when we read the story. Like, we could not believe it. It was one of those things where we were actually kind of worried at the time that we would have to just accept the story because, you know, we wanted John in there and it would be rude to turn her down. And instead, it ended up honestly probably being better than John's story. John's was the one that ended up getting nominated for a Hugo because the Rabid Puppies took an interest in it. And I know that John himself did not like his own story. He criticizes it a lot. But it's really a very good story in its own right, as much as John will insist otherwise.
And now it's time to promote Jaji's stuff and let everyone know that the very first Rachel Griffin book is always free on Kindle, so you have no excuses.
It is.
Yeah, by the way, The Unexpected Enlightenment of Rachel Griffin is a very good book.
And that's the one where Astrid shows up in as her self later.
Yes, Astrid, the main character of her short story in God Robot, shows up in the Unexpected Enlightenment series, and I believe, according to Jaji, she is going to become a much more important character as the series goes on. Carl Philip Gabler says, I've recommended the free Rachel Griffin book to lots of people and even got some to read it. Well, that's nice.
That's a real king move.
April, if you don't end up writing a Pinkerton's ghost story for us, then I'll need you to narrate the story that I'm going to be writing from Violet's perspective later this year.
So I do have a story. I just need to make time to sit down and write it, but it's basically mostly worked out in my head. I may need to figure out exactly the monster I'm using. But I promise at some point I will write it. It will come eventually.
So the problem that I have is that I am writing, and this is a little sneak peek for you Pinkerton's Ghost fans. By the way, Carl Philip Gabler says earlier, much earlier, but I'm going to mention it now. I hope the bad thing happening to Sean doesn't involve hurting Violet. So I'm not going to spoil it, but I will say that Violet is going to be heavily involved in the plot of the season. Violet shows up as early as episode 1 of season 2, or my episode 3. I keep saying episode 1. I mean my episode 1. Episode 3 of season 2. Violet shows up again. She will be heavily involved, and one story this season is going to be from Violet's perspective. I will need a narrator for that story. So I don't know. Any female friends who aren't narrating their own stuff. So yeah, it's going to be Sean is going to go on a trip with Violet to Ireland, and they're going to get involved with a leprechaun.
So I did see a hilarious news thing that says that 3'5" man arrested for coercing women to sleep with him after he promised them a pot of gold, while of course dressed as a leprechaun.
That's amazing.
For those short kings out there. Megabuster Shepherd says, I cannot get into Dune. Tried multiple times, gave up, and accepted it is beyond me. So Dune is, how should I say it? It's complicated, but it's really not as complicated as people say. Like, the overarching plot is that Leto Atreides gets tricked into taking Dune, and is and it's a trick, and his family's nearly killed, except for his son, who happens to be the chosen one, and he leads the people in revolt against the evil Harkonnens who tricked Leto Atreides. Like, that's it. That's the whole plot. You know, it's all kinds of it. People like to make it sound more complicated than it is, but it's really just not.
If you ever want your kids to drink more water, get them to read Dune, because I was really amused when my brother was reading it, and then he was like drinking a glass of water and just like, wow, water.
That's funny.
Pretty
That is pretty funny. But yeah, I've never read Dune and have no interest. The greatest sci-fi, and I don't need to because I happen to know that the greatest sci-fi novel ever written is A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter M. Miller.
I was gonna say the Book of Mormon.
Oh, that's a pretty good burn. I'm granted, is A Canticle for Leibowitz and Dune are literally nothing like each other, and to call them part of the same genre is absolutely silly.
Oh yeah.
But you know what? A Canticle for Leibowitz is a great book, and I will always make time to recommend it. I am amazed that John C. Wright has never read that book, because he would absolutely love it. It's honestly kind of a shame. I've always mentioned I think that the Superversives have two truly great, capital G, great writers. One of them is John C. Wright, and the other is Nick Cole. Unfortunately, I think that Nick Cole has... this is going to sound weird, and I don't fully mean it, but like he's sort of sold out. That sounds like it has more judgment in it than I intend. I don't mean to say that he's really done anything wrong, but Nick Cole has decided that he wanted to make money first and foremost. And that is a perfectly noble thing to do, in the sense that we all need to make money to survive. But his best works, you know, he has he has some moments in his works that are just incredibly moving, and I think he's the only writer who has ever, even at times, equaled John C. Wright in terms of quality.
I will say,
I think that
hold on. I will say that they do come out in Galaxy's Edge on occasion. Like Gods and Legionnaires is quite frankly one of the best books of science fiction written in the 2020s. Like, and I know
I
we're
did
only
really enjoy Legionnaire. I think part of the problem, I really enjoyed Galaxy's Edge, though. I do think there was a like, since there was the other writer,
Jason Ansbach.
Dan Spatch.
yeah. I was blanking on how to pronounce his name. It almost seemed like, especially with Darth Solace, they like build him up a certain way, but then once he's got the power and the control, they have him act in a way that seems very like I'm like, why did they have him act like that? I'm trying to remember, like the way he could like second guess himself. I don't know. They made him seem so much different than the way they built him up.
He
I don't know.
got
It was
possessed by
really
Force Ghosts of
there.
Cylons.
Some What was that?
He was influenced by Force Ghosts of Cylons.
Yeah, I
It's
don't know.
it's
There's the getting books, especially Legionnaire. Absolutely, like love that. That one can just be a standalone if you want to just read that one. And the rest was I think they've got the second season of all those stories out. Um, so I might like dig into it again. But there's definitely a few things that I feel like suffered because of the co-writing, possibly, where there was certain ways they, especially the character of Garth Solis, where they like took him in one direction, but then took him in this other direction that I didn't really like.
So, Cole is a weird one to me. Like, I read his book Soda Pop Soldier, and Soda Pop Soldier was marketed, and especially by our guys at the time, as like, the superversive / based alternative to Ready Player One. And in some ways it was. In other ways, I hated the main character, I just didn't like him. He was a loser who had just been left by his girlfriend who played video games for a living, and he was the hero.
yeah.
And I did not like that. Uh, on the other hand, Nick Cole's Wasteland trilogy is absolutely gorgeous. Especially The Savage Boy is a masterpiece. It is a straight up masterpiece. I mention it a lot because it's a fascinating book in that it does everything that we say shouldn't be done. Like, it breaks all of the rules of superversive fiction. It is brutal. All of the hopes of the protagonist end up coming to nothing. Like, people die for really no reason. It's written in this Hemingway-esque, very sparse style. Like, it's just an absolutely it's a
My brother called it.
difficult book
My
to
brother
read.
said it was like Old Man and the Sea, but in the desert.
Well, that was Old Man in the Wasteland. That's literally
Yeah.
what that book was. And also
I
it had,
hadn't read Old Man and the Sea, so I didn't catch that at all. So it took my younger brother saying that for me to go, oh, I had no
I've
idea.
never read it, but it's a famous enough book that I knew the plot without needing really to look it up. But anyway, like The Savage Boy though was different. Like, The Savage Boy is a book I bring up a lot because it breaks so many rules. And it ends on this absolutely brutal note where, like, his wife, I'm gonna spoil it here, so sorry guys. It's how many years old
I haven't
now?
read it. Don't spoil it.
No. All right, but only because you asked. Anyway,
Sam,
the point
Sam-
is, it ends. I'm not going to spoil it. Leave me alone, Ben. I'm not spoiling it. It ends just on this brutal note, and everything about the book just feels so bleak, I guess. And yet, it is superversive. It is 100% superversive, and I can't imagine anybody else reading the book and not coming to that conclusion. It's just a masterwork. I think it needed that third book in the series, which is called The Road is a River. That book was necessary to really complete the motif and to really complete the narrative properly. But The Savage Boy on its own is truly a masterwork. The Road is a River was not quite as good, but it was necessary to fill out the trilogy, and it was excellent in its own right, and it had a very moving ending itself. So Bradford Walker says Nick Cole lives in California and he's a dissonant. He needs that money. I can relate, being that I live in New Jersey, where everything is also extremely expensive, and I'm surrounded by leftists. What? Uh,
And
yeah.
he won't become a Chad and just start bullying the leftist soy boys, as is our
No.
right.
So Carl Philip Gabler says the sequel to Soda Pop Soldier was also super brutal and bleak in its ending. Oh, I didn't know there was a sequel. I know that there was a prequel, which was Control Alt Revolt,
I
and
like
realized that.
Control Alt
Oh
Revolt.
yeah, no, I do own the sequel to Soda Pop Soldier, but I never finished it.
Pop Cult Warlord, what a name.
Yeah, thank you. Pop Cult Warlord, which is a fantastic name, much better name than Soda Pop Soldier.
Eh.
Uh, so the problem with Soda Pop Soldier is that I have no idea what it's about. However, Pop Cult Warlord, I immediately know what it's talking about, though that's possibly because I run in the circles where the term pop cult is used. So Pop Cult Warlord makes perfect sense to me. Maybe to somebody who doesn't run in my circles. But Nick Cole has this, like he has a series, I forget the name of it, but it's a zombie series, and I'm not talking about. He has two different zombie books. He has one zombie book that's like a romance between two people on opposite sides of the country who try to meet up with each other during the zombie apocalypse. And the other is just a generic, there is a zombie apocalypse, and they hole up in a McMansion on top of a hill, and that's the story. And there were 3 books in that series the last I checked. And the series itself was just kind of okay. However, there were moments in it, like individual scenes and lines and moments that were just beautifully done and beautifully superversive. Like the scene in The Dark Knight, I believe it was called, or just Dark Knight, where the soldier who was tasked with protecting the library is also looking after a mentally retarded child who is with him, and the monsters have taken over the library, and he realizes choice where he can either save the child or save the library, and he realizes at that moment that if he were to save the library, then the very reason that they would need that knowledge almost wouldn't matter, because because by letting a retarded child die at the hands of the monsters, he would be losing their humanity anyway, and there would be no reason for them to stay alive, so he chooses to save the child. Just absolutely beautiful scene in a book that I think was kind of pedestrian overall. But that scene just sticks with me, man. Like I won't forget that moment in it. And there are moments like that in the series. There are a couple others that are like that. Carl Gabler says, I love Soda Pop Soldier, but it was very action heavy and plot light until halfway through. Like I said, Soda Pop Soldier was good. I just didn't like the main character at all. I didn't find him likable.
I like Control
Uh,
Revolt best.
I never finished it. I own it. I never finished it. I should.
It's worth it.
I'd probably enjoy it. Yeah, I would probably enjoy it. But
There's
that's the thing. Like Vox Day said this. He's absolutely right. If Cole wanted to be, he would be one of the masters of science fiction. As it is, he could hit that mark, but he actively chooses to be commercial, I guess is the word.
yeah,
Go ahead.
I guess it's so like thinking about Nick Cole. Uh, he's it's weird because he's like the next grandmaster after John C. Wright by age, and there aren't really anyone else who can claim it. Because honestly, China Mielville hasn't had a good book in like 5 to 10 years, and honestly, the book that Vox Day raves about, which is about these alien creatures who can't lie, and when they try to lie, reality changes to match their lie. Um, wasn't as great. Railsea was barely readable. though the ending scene is absolutely hilarious, and almost makes it worthwhile. There was like too many kid characters with their own plot line going on, and it just didn't work for me. Like, it's probably more of an editing problem. Like, I'm starting to pick up what's probably an editing problem and what's probably a writer problem. Like, I can't even read Scalzi's blog posts, but I could read China Melville, and China Melville is probably a more insane writer than leftist writer than Scalzi is. But
Yes and no. So Scalzi is somebody who I think genuinely. I'm trying to think of how to put this, but he doesn't understand the implications of the things that he says. He's such he's an NPC, right? He is a
yes,
non-player character. He agrees with the status quo and with the leftist overlords because he's a good little leftist. China Meeville is a genuine revolutionary, and in that sense is more honest.
yep.
So yes, I could stand. I actually can stand people like China Meeville, or I don't even know how to pronounce his name,
There's an I,
more
so
than I
it's
can stand people like John Scalzi.
and it's not even just the Vox Day thing. Vox Day brought Scalzi to my attention. It's genuine, and it's one of those things where, like, he got the George R. R. Martin disease the second he got an amazing contract with Tor, which I can't help but think that it'll be part of the bricks that wall them into the cellars next to the casts of Amontillado. Um, I still quote that story so often.
The Cask of Amontillado.
Yep, it's like, for the love of God, Montresor. Yes, for the love of God. I love it.
Cask
I
of
did a short
Amontillado.
play of that in my homeschool co-op, and my friend played the other guy, and then I got walled in with pillows, and it was a little bit terrifying because my friend is a really good actor, especially at being bad guys.
The
Cask of
babies
Amontillado was a
is
great story. Poe was just
educated.
great generally.
Yep. It's
Why are we assuming Montresor is the bad guy?
we don't. He
I mean, I don't know. I can't remember the story, but from my perspective, he was the bad guy because he was walling me in with pillows.
You deserved it. You insulted his family too many times. He says it outright. I don't know why we doubt such a forthright and honest fellow.
and he's Italian.
Like
That's the thing.
Montresor. Exactly.
Of course he swears revenge and does something ironic, chaining up a drunk inside of a drinking cellar.
Oh wow, I never even picked up on that, but you're absolutely right.
There's no point in doing anything like this unless you get the irony going, Anthony. It's the irony. Like
Isn't
getting
it ironic, don't you think? Oh,
Eh.
Anthony, you've done it again.
I wish
A
I could
clap.
put I wish I could put more Poe into my horror. The closest I've come is when talking about a church that goes bad, it kind of goes all House of Usher and collapses in metaphorically on the church family.
See, the ending of Rewcastle Manor Mystery, it's very House of Usher, which is my favorite Poe story, and one of my favorite short stories ever, honestly. Fall of the House of Usher is amazing. Poe is one of the few, like, relatively older, 1800s era writer who I'm genuinely a huge fan of. Honestly, I like most of his stories. I don't know if I liked every single one. I mean, he wrote a ton, so that's probably just statistically not the case. But I like most of them.
I didn't think much of his detective
House of
fiction.
Usher is... Well, his detective fiction, it's a little bit unfair, because he essentially invented the genre. So, like, the mysteries weren't great, but nobody else was doing it.
Yeah. I get you.
Like,
you know,
Murders in the Rue Murders in the Rue Morgue is a really good example of that. Like, is the solution to Murders in the Rue Morgue really contrived? Well, yes, it is. But on the other hand, like, there was no signposts on how to do this. Poe created them.
Yep.
And honestly, the Purloined Letter is actually really clever. Like, low key, the Purloined Letter is actually a really smart story. Megabuster Shepherd says Mask of Red Death is my favorite. That is a very, very good pick. Mask of the Red Death is a great story.
Oh,
Can I go on a side rant real quick?
Sure.
No, go ahead.
I've been noticing this, like, trend of just things people say of, like, oh, we love that, or, like, we love to see it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I
Probably not.
don't.
No.
Sorry.
Okay, I've been seeing it, like, I don't know, in whatever circles I am, I guess mostly women saying it, of, like, we
don't
love
talk
to
to
see it,
women.
or, I don't know, I just saw, like, a post that said, like, we love a house with good curve appeal, or I don't know, it was talking about the design of some house, or I don't know, saying stuff with we, and I'm like, it wasn't that bad, like, here and there, but, like, I've seen it a couple times today, and now all I can think is Legion, and I don't really like this trend. And my friend said it to me, talking about, like, we were both ended up having, like, breakfast foods for dinner, and she said something about, like, oh, we love to see it, just, a sort of internet speech trend in a way, just kind of phrases that people say online and then other people pick up. But now all I think is Legion. And I'm like, I don't really like this we language when just talking about yourself. It's a little creepy. That's my rant. I'm over.
Not a royal we person. Thank goodness.
That's such a specific issue. I love it.
I forgot that this was the stream. Like, I keep telling myself I should try and remember when you guys stream so I can listen in. And then I saw you guys were on Discord. I'm like, oh, they're hanging out. I want to hang out with them. And I hopped on and realized it was a stream. So then I started lurking until we got sidetracked about the rights again.
It's
So,
fine.
let's
QnAs are more freeform than non-QnAs, so I'm kind of fine with it.
Imagine an underground rich kid party where somebody wears a COVID mask made to look like a COVID patient's face. Based.
I've seen them. I got fooled by it once. And
Oh,
it's
wow.
like, when it's
That's
not
creepy.
a COVID patient, but like a face mask that's a face. I'm like, oh, that's clever. I mean, it only took me a second before I realized it, but you know.
Megabuster Shepherd says normie memes. I don't know what he's referring to. Do you know what he's referring to?
Yes, I understand. But it would take too long to explain, normie.
Carl Philip Gabler says, and then an actual COVID outbreak occurs. Yeah,
Only
Mask of the
among
Red
the
Death.
vaccinated.
Mask of the Red Death is honestly an underrated story. It's great. I love it. What are the best Poe stories? That's a great story. Amontillado, House of Usher is probably his best. Black Cat's not one of my favorites.
Really?
Hop Frog I like more.
Hop Frog is pretty sweet. I actually had one of those Fairy Tales Illustrated ones with Poe stories, and the artist just did it on point. Also, it's one of those things where it's like just the ending of the evil king and stuff like that, and why.
So
Hop
I was
Frog
in.
perfect.
I discovered Poe when I was in middle school. I literally on Halloween I went to the library and I got a book, an anthology of Poe stories, and I just sat there for probably like an hour or two and just read through the book of Poe stories. And that was how, and it was the first time I think I'd ever really read something that I thought was genuinely kind of scary. And I still think that to this day. And of course, everybody knows of the Edgar Allan Poe of Europe. Say it with me. Roald Dahl. No, really. He has a reputation as the Edgar Allan Poe of Europe.
Really? I love Roald Dahl.
Roald Dahl has some excellent horror stories. His most famous was turned into an episode of the Alfred Hitchcock show. It is called Lamb to the Slaughter, and it's about a woman who bludgeons her husband to death with a frozen leg of mutton and then serves it to the police when they come investigating.
Ugh.
Great story. Clever. He also had an
So-
extremely creepy story called Royal Jelly about a father who was like feeding his infant son royal jelly from a beehive, and he was slowly turning into like a giant larva. That one was memorable.
So wait, so he wrote all the cool children's stories, and then wrote that stuff as well?
Oh, he cut his teeth writing adult fiction.
Oh yeah,
Like-
I loved him growing up, particularly his autobiographies, Boy, and especially Going Solo. I really liked. And of course,
Going Solo is probably my favorite autobiography ever. It's an incredible
it's so
book.
cool, amazing. I need to. It's been years, but I listened to it several times as a kid. But and of course like BFG and different things. I'm kind of amused because I feel like I can write some really creepy stuff, but then I've also got my children's thing. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not that different from one of my childhood favorite authors.
Oh, I love Roald Dahl. I do think his children's tends to be his best, even though I do like some of his short stories. And some of them are really funny. But I forget the name of the story, but there was one story was about like a couple of guys overheard someone saying that they would pay good money just to punch someone in the face. So they say, "Hey, I'll do it." You go, "Are you serious about that?" Go, "Give me £100 and they'll do it." And they like wait outside of a big fancy party, jump out, clock the dude square in the nose, and then run off. And then they like start a business where they just punch people for money.
Amazing.
That was pretty good. One of his short stories was turned into probably his best children's book, Danny the Champion of the World. Any of you read that one?
Nope.
So that story, first off, that's where the BFG was introduced. Fun fact. He was actually introduced in Danny the Champion of the World. And it was about a young boy who lives with his father in like a caravan. Like literally he lives in some sort of traveling caravan. And he learns that his father used to be part of like a ring of illegal pheasant hunters. And he comes up with an idea and also, by the way, the BFG is introduced because the father tells him stories about the BFG as a bedtime story. And then Dahl actually turned the bedtime stories in Danny the Champion of the World into the BFG novel. But anyway, so in Danny the Champion of the World, Danny comes up with the idea. He learns that his father had gotten buckshot in his back because he had gone into the grounds of some rich, snooty asshole hunting pheasants, and he had nearly gotten caught. And then Danny comes up with the idea where they could take sleeping pills, and you learn that pheasants love raisins, and that if they sow the sleeping pills into the raisins, then they'll knock the pheasants out and they'll be able to steal them en masse from the grounds. And there's this amazing scene where they go into the forest and they hunt all the pheasants with the sleeping pill filled raisins. And then they have a woman who is part of their pheasant hunting ring, who is literally a mother baby, who's the wife of the pastor. And as she's walking away, the pheasants all start waking up. And then they burst out of the baby's carriage and scatter all over the street. This whole section was the short story, and Dahl just took this part of it, added it to the novel, then added all of the other stuff about Danny and his father and turned it into a children's novel. It's probably my favorite Roald Dahl children's novel, and I like quite a few of them. Matilda is also great. They're all good. I'm just a huge Roald Dahl fan. His incredible sequel to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where they go into space and fight aliens, that is real. That is an actual book that exists.
It's just canids.
Yes, the Vermicious Canids. I love bringing that up. Hey, anybody remember the time that Willy Wonka, Charlie, and his family all went into space and fought aliens? And then after this happens, they go down into the minus world where people can be subtracted into nothingness, and they have to like rescue Grandma Georgina, who has been aged down past the point of existence and is trapped in the minus world. And this is the plot of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory 2. Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator.
Wonderful book.
It's a completely insane book. It is way more insane than the original. I think the original's probably better, but the second book is definitely crazier.
I enjoyed it quite a bit.
You read Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator?
Yeah.
Nice. I'm always happy when there are people who have heard. But going solo is a great. Megabuster Shepard said Poe was actually a jolly fellow in real life. He liked to get drunk, tell jokes at bars. He also liked to marry his 13-year-old cousin.
Yeah, that was great.
So, jolly fella. That's what a guy that Edgar Allan Poe was.
It's one of those things. He lived the artist lifestyle. Play hard, die hard, something, get drunk, alcoholism, something, syphilis, something. You know.
Something. Every woman he ever loved died of tuberculosis. Which is actually true.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, there's some things to Edgar Allan Poe that's just kind of like you, but then on the other hand, it's like, ooh, you know. I'm sorry to hear that, champ. And
yeah, I mean,
honestly,
Megabuster Shepard says, I didn't know that. Ew. I'm actually surprised you didn't know that. It's one of the biggest debates raging around Poe. Because here's the thing. Here's the weirdest part of this. By all accounts, Poe genuinely loved his wife. She genuinely loved him. And she never had a word bad to say about him. There is this huge raging debate over whether Poe actually slept with her or not. I mean, she didn't get pregnant. So there is that. But it is extremely weird.
Wait, he actually got married to her?
Yes.
Huh.
They got married and they had a stable, loving relationship. In fact. It's extremely weird.
Because I hear about that, and I'm going to be really clear with this. His works does not come off as some sort of sexual creep. Like, I've read the works of sexual creeps. You can look at it throughout Marion Zimmer Bradley and Walter Breen's work. It's there. You can't get rid of it. It's also in Delaney's work and a few other people. Like, they don't hide it. This is the reason why I'm questioning on Asimov. Because he likes the older, full-bodied women. But at the same time, his son ran a massive CP operation. So it's like one of those things where there's deviancy, but I don't know. With Poe, I just don't see any of it. Like, that's the thing. And like it's one of those things that like you hear about it happening in the past. And I'm sure that a lot of it that you didn't hear about was bad. But it's one of those things that's like, so wait, they were stable? Yeah. With the 10 or 20 year age difference. Yeah. It's just the weirdest thing. I don't know what to think of it.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. But this is the weird part of it. The weird part of it is that by all accounts, they were very happy together. Like, she had nothing bad to say about him. His family disapproved, not because they were first cousins, which was relatively normal at the time, but because there was a large age difference, 13 years. Incidentally, she died first of tuberculosis.
Oh no.
So, like I said,
Sometimes
Megabuster Shepard says, Mega Buster Shepherd says Jerry Lewis vibes. I suppose.
I don't know. I don't remember what Jerry Lewis is up to.
Can I do a little reading? I have a book called Edgar Allan Crow. It's bird themed, about Edgar Allan Crow's life. You ready for this?
Yes.
Of course.
Edgar Allan Crow hatched in Boston in 1809. When he was just a chick, he was adopted by Swan Allen and his wife, Frances Valentine. Raised by his adopted father to be a business bird, Crow dreamed instead of writing poems like his idol, Lark Bryan. Edgar went to it's college but spelled C-A-W. I'm not sure how to pronounce that.
College.
Oh, college. At the University of Virginia.
Wow.
Virginia. University of Virginia. But he had to leave school when he gambled away his nest egg and flew home penniless. At home, he learned his fiancée, Maria Rooster, I think, had left him. Heartbroken, he soared away to become a poet, and published his first book. Was it Tamerlane?
Tamerlane, I think.
But it's Crane at the end. Tamerlane.
Yeah, come on, Ben. Get the joke.
No, I refuse. I am
Hoping
completely
for
clueless as to
adventure.
what's happening.
Crow enlisted in the army and flew north to the military academy at Nest Point. But he was soon kicked out of the nest for refusing to attend classes. Poor Crow was feeling lost. He found family in Baltimore, where his aunt soothed his ruffled feathers and took care of him as if he were her own fledgling. Edgar soon learned that his adopted father, Swan Allen, had died, leaving none of his seed money to Edgar. But he didn't let that clip his wings. Edgar began writing began writing contestant winning short stories and winged it as a brooding book reviewer. As his writing career soared, so did Crow's heart. He married, oh gosh, so it's like, I think it's Virginia, but with like J.
Yeah.
J.
Her real
So,
name is Virginia.
These, I don't know, something like that. In Richmond, the Lovebirds didn't have much money, but they were happy. Crow got his big beak in 1845 when he published his poem, The Raven. Fans flocked to his lectures. Crow didn't put all his eggs in one basket. He wrote poetry, horror stories, and mysteries. His words can give goosebumps, and he was known as a master of macabre. I think it's like
macabre.
I don't know how to read these bird puns sometimes. Macabre. Come here, baby. Here, last page. Edgar Allan Crow had many stories that put a feather in his cap, like the telltale heart, the cask of Amontillado, the fall of the flock of Usher, and poems like Anna B. Kali. When Virginia died from a sudden illness, Edgar's nest was empty, and he couldn't lift a feather to write. A few years later, he died mysteriously, just like a character in one of his stories. Edgar Allan Crow was one of the feathers of modern literature. His stories and poems have inspired countless others. Even after his death, Edgar Allan Crow's contribution to American literature lives on. His dark tales remain fan favorites even today. All right, that's it.
Amazing.
Outstanding.
I saw that at Walmart for $5 and had to get it.
You made the right choice. As bad as just like, I hate everything.
Well, no, I shouldn't be. I shouldn't really complain. I'm the one who puns the most out of the three of us. Ken, Anthony, and myself, to the point where I was driving Ken to murder by the end of my stay in California.
That's true.
And he's like, "Oh, thank goodness you're only here for a week." I'm like, "Oh, but I wanted to stay longer." Oh, no.
Just so you guys get to meet up.
Hmm?
It's so sweet that you guys get to meet up.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to try and swing it with Anthony soon, just so he can bask in my pleasant presence and smell my musk, which is important for every editor to do.
But that's that's another story. That's a problem.
I'll figure it out. God willing.
God willing.
Yep.
As April also knows, that is a problem. But
Oh,
we'll figure something out.
Any Jerry Lewis married his 15-year-old cousin? Yeah, that's just weird.
That's weird, all right. That is definitely strange.
Weird, especially this late in the game. Any questions for Pinkerton's ghost stuff before we wrap up? As I'm lost in a maze with a map in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Bonk.
Who what?
What? I'm asking if
I missed the end of that.
If anyone has any questions while I'm lost in a maze with a map at the top right-hand corner of my screen. Give them a minute to percolate. And let me illuminate the possibilities. I can't remember what's that
That's
from.
a good song. That's from Friend Like Me, Aladdin.
Oh.
Alibaba had them 40 feet. You know the song. Good song.
Da-da-da.
Little play of that. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Anything you want to say before we end the stream, Ben?
Yeah, it looks like we're not getting any questions. All right. Yep. All right. Well, I guess I'll thank everyone for joining us as we finish up our obligations for, I guess, July and August and whatnot. And then we'll have another one in September, probably not on a Sunday. So look forward to that. Save up your questions. As always, we do love our sweet, sweet subscribers, especially Cordell, and especially that other guy who never really shows up, but we love him anyway. Do look forward. I am planning out a Kickstarter, and I'll have more information for that when I'm just ready to do it.
Megabuster Shepard says Pinkerton's in space when? Sooner than you think, but
Actually,
not
yes.
as soon as you want.
Sooner than you think.
Sooner than you think, but not as soon as you want. All right.
All right. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next week, more than likely.